Here are the answers for exercise 4. First question. What are the two types of entries a layer to switch can have? Static and dynamic. Question 2. Select two correct statements about MAC table entries in a layer to switch. Here we are talking about the characteristics of dynamic and static entries. Dynamic entries get learnt when a frame comes in, and the static entries remain static, and are made by the administrator. So the correct answers are C and D. Question 3. How does the timer for dynamic MAC table entries behave? The answer is the timer counts down from 300 to 0. Question 4. When a layer to switch receives a frame, what does it do? Two possibilities. If there is an entry, then another frame comes with the same value. Refresh the timer associated with the entry. And if the entry is not there, then create an entry and set the timer from 300 seconds. So the correct answers are A and B. Question 5. What happens to the aging timer of a dynamic MAC address entry in a layer to switch if no frames are received from the MAC address? Eventually it will get deleted, but in this context of this question, the timer counts down from 300 to 0. Okay. Answer is D. Question 6. What happens when a layer to switch receives a frame from a source MAC address that already exists in the MAC table? Plain and simple. It is already there. You refresh the entry and reset the timer to 300 seconds. So the correct answer is B. Question 7. What is the purpose of refreshing the timer in the MAC table? The reason we refresh the timer every time is so that the entry remains in the MAC table for longer duration or extended duration, and so that's the correct answer. But if you look far beyond this question, the intention is to avoid flooding and to continue forwarding. So the correct answer is A. Question 8. When a layer to switch does not receive any frame from a MAC address for a certain period, the entry in the MAC table will be aged out. However, if the switch receives a frame from the same MAC address before the timer expires, the timer will be refreshed and the entry will remain in the MAC table for at least additional 300 seconds. So the correct answer is A. Question 9. Before receiving a frame, the entry for a MAC address in the table has 30 seconds remaining. So pay attention to the MAC table. So the MAC address is A, port P1, and there are 30 seconds remaining. And the next part of the question is, after 20 seconds, what will be the state of the MAC address table? Simple. The countdown timer will continue. It is currently 30. After 20 seconds, it will become 10. So the entry, we have been asked to select two answers. The entry will still have 10 seconds remaining on its timer. That's correct. And then the next best answer is the entry will be removed from the MAC table after 10 more seconds. So currently it is 30 seconds. After 20 seconds it will be 10 seconds remaining, and further after 10 more seconds the entry will be removed. So the correct answers are B and D. Question 10. The following shows an entry for MAC address in the table has 10 seconds remaining. 10 seconds remaining. After 12 seconds, what will happen? Obviously, since no frame has arrived, the entry will get deleted. So the correct answer would be a MAC table that has no entries, and that is option C. Okay. Moving on to the next question. Question 11. The topology below displays the present state of the switch MAC table. It says A is learned on P1 and dynamically with age 25. Now if a frame with the DA arrives on the port after 5 seconds, if it arrives with the destination address of A and source address C, that means this entry is not getting modified, a new entry is to be created. And after how many seconds it is coming in? It is coming in after 5 seconds. That means this entry, whatever is the entry currently in the MAC table, for A will have reduced to 20 seconds, and then the new entry will be created for C on port P3 with 300 seconds. So let's look for that option. And this is the option C is the correct answer for it. Next question. What can you infer after looking at the following diagram? It shows two entries in the MAC table. One for MAC address B, another for MAC address A. The first one has a age remaining for 35 seconds. That means a frame with source address B would have arrived on port P2, 300 minus 35, that is 265 seconds ago. And the second entry is for A, P1, that is with 200 seconds remaining. That means a frame with source address A would have arrived 300 minus 200, that is 100 seconds back or ago on port P1. So those are the correct answers. The following diagram shows the present state of the MAC table. A is learnt on port P1 and the remaining age is 10 seconds. If after 20 seconds a frame arrives on port P3, with source address C, and it is not talking about any source address A. That means after 20 seconds this entry, whatever is in the MAC table, will get deleted, and then a new entry will be created for source address C on port P3 with timer equal to 300. So that is the answer. So this correct answer is B. Okay, moving on to question 14. Which of the following are true regarding static MAC table entries? Yeah, so let's go over the options. They are made by an administrator and do not age. That is correct. Because of static MAC entries, the frame with destination matching, the static entries always get forwarded to the corresponding port. That is also correct. Static entries are not affected by frame reception and remain fixed in the MAC table. That is the answer E, which is also correct. And option C, which is because of static MAC entries, frame with destination matching, the static flooding doesn't happen. And option D, static entries can be aged out after a certain period of time, is also incorrect. So the correct answers are A, B and E. Moving on to question 15. In the following topological diagram, what will happen when the frame reaches on port P1? So on port P1, this frame will be received, and the source address is A. A is not in the MAC table. So an entry will be created from source address A against port P1. Okay. And then, of course, the switch, that is the first part. Then the second part is the switch detects the destination MAC address B in the MAC table, finds it. What is the destination address? B. B is in the MAC table and is associated with port P2. So it will forward it on this port. That is also correct. So answer B is also correct. The printer connected to port P2 receives the frame, checks the destination MAC address. Since the destination address is also B and its own address is also B, it will accept it. And hence all the three options A, B, C are correct, and that is why the option D is the best. Question 16. In the following topological diagram, what will happen when the frame reaches port P1? Kind of a repetition of question 15, but let's look. There's a small subtle difference in between here. The first step is correct. The source address will be learned on port P1. That is correct. Second is the switch will check the destination MAC address B in the MAC table. Since it is there and it is associated with port P4, it will forward it to that port. The PC connected to port P4 will check the destination address of the frame. Since it will not match, it will drop it. This is Again, all the three options are correct. And so the correct best answer is D. This is the case where the traffic is getting black holed because the static entry has not been updated. Okay. Question 17. In the following topology, try applying the following to MAC tables and then pick the correct option. Okay. Let us see what is happening. Two MAC tables. So the frame is coming. Let's look at the answers. For example A, the frame will be black hole. Okay. With example A. So we're not talking about black hole or forwarded. So we are not talking about learning. We are looking about black holing or forwarded. With the first example, yes, we have to apply. This frame is coming in, source address A, destination address B. Here B is for, okay, B is on P4. B is on P4. So the frame gets out of this P4 and this is getting black holed. For example 1 is MAC table, frame will be black holed. So this is correct. This option is correct. And then let us see with B2, B and P2 static. B and P2 is forwarded. MAC address 2, frame will be forwarded and utilized. So the correct answers are A and B. I'm sorry, A and D. There's a typo here. This should be D. And the correct answers are A and D. Okay. The following depicts MAC table entries for a layer 2 switch. For some reason, electricity is lost and resumes after a few minutes. Which of the following are true? Here's the concept of the MAC table entries related to dynamic and static are being discussed, where the focus is on your understanding, whether you understand that the static entries do not get purged as a result of a reboot, whereas dynamic entries get purged or deleted. So the correct answer is MAC table will automatically repopulate the static entries and MAC table will not repopulate the dynamic entries. Okay. On to question number 19. In the following depicted topology, which of the following are true? Okay. Here, again, previous question was about reboot. Here it is about disconnecting the cable. So if we are disconnecting a cable connected to a that is being tied to a dynamic entry, that dynamic entry will not be reestablished or repopulated, whereas the static entry will be repopulated. Or it will not get affected. Disconnecting cable connected to port P3 will result in dynamic entry related to MAC-C getting deleted. This is correct. Disconnecting cable connected to port P1 will result in static entry related to not getting deleted. So the correct answers are A and B. With that, we wrap up the discussion about the correct answers about this exercise.